guess, from that distance would be questionable.
Okay.
But you could certainly, you know, relate to the fact the sound was coming from there.
What do you see though? Like what?
I see the dog making the.
You can
going like that,
see.
my
You
ear
can
bark.
see his mouth moving from that far away.
Yes, ma'am. I have seen it.
I mean, that's up to your judgment, but it's quite far away. But I can tell you that he's, I mean, in the 2 times that I've seen him under different circumstances with other dogs, with people, with myself, coming up the driveway to greet a family member, he doesn't bark. He's not barking. And he's a nice dog. I mean, it's unfortunate he's the only one who's not here, and all of us are, but I'm sure if you met him, he's not a very reactive or scary dog. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
That's good. Mr. Chairman, if I can have the indulgence of recalling Mr. Pinkston on one very specific issue, I think relating to
Sure, absolutely.
comment. Mr. Pinkston.
I just wanted to state,
Go ahead.
let's go again, okay, that the purpose of any training is so that something is accomplished, something is, a task is completed. And the electronic collars, just like a standard choke collar or prong collar, the whole purpose is to teach a behavior, and then the behavior is learned. And the collars are temporary. This is not a situation where you put a collar on a dog and has to stay on him for the rest of his life. Once he understands not to bark under low-level stressful situations, he's not going to bark. And I totally believe that Brando has learned not to bark in most situations because he was not a barker, watchdog type of dog from the onset. And I didn't agree with Mike Kruster that he needed it, but again, he was very anxious to resolve the situation. So he encouraged me to work the dog with the collar, which I did. And he has had the collar on, as Mike stated, for 9 weeks at home. And when she came over the house, I think she observed a despondent dog because it was excessive now. He doesn't need the collar. And I'm sure Mr. Kruster would be more than willing to put it on him again down the road if necessary, if there was a problem, if there was a complaint. But I'm here to state that you put a collar on a dog, or you give a dog a training program to accomplish something, to teach them something. And Brando has learned, unfortunately almost, now never to bark. When, like any dog, and I know there's about a dozen dogs in the neighborhood, I mean, if someone was pounding on Mike's door in the middle of the night, I would hope that the dog would bark to alert the family that an intruder was at the door. So my point is, I don't believe that the collar should be anything that should be mandatory. I believe the dog has learned the behavior modification and clearly understands that in 99% of the situations, he's not supposed to bark. And he's clearly showed me that as well. And that's what I wanted to state. Thank you.
All right, anything further? Mr. Chairman?
Any questions for the attorney?
If I could just sum up very briefly, as a Fortis used to say. It's pretty plain there's some barking going on here. I think the issue for the board is A, to determine whether or not it's excessive, and B, to determine what dogs are responsible. With respect to the claim of excessive barking, there are no dates. The times are very vague. And with all due respect, and completely certain that there's a degree of irritation at Northridge, whether or not to, under different circumstances, normal people rising to the level of excessive barking, I'm not sure. That's something that I think the board has got to determine. But when it comes to the issue of identifying precisely which animal might be subject to an order that this board has the authority to issue, I think the complainants have utterly failed in this particular case to identify Brando as the dog responsible for the excessive barking. And again, I hate to bring credibility in here, but again, those photographs I think are worth 1,000 words. Credibility is important. I don't think anybody has seen Brando barking here. They may have thought it, they may have wished it, but they did not see it. And I think the other thing that we've tried to do tonight, as distinguished from the prior hearing in this matter, is to focus a lot more on the dog than on the neighbors or the individuals or the emotions involved. And I think you've heard pretty compelling evidence from our side here with people, with one expert in particular, very familiar since birth with this particular dog, who has, I think, testified pretty persuasively that he is a docile dog, not given to excessive barking. You've heard Dr. Rubel testify essentially to the same thing, albeit based upon more limited observation. And for all of those, and I think, hopefully, the board is satisfied that Mr. and Mrs. Cresta are really trying to be responsive here and be responsible at the same time for their dog. So I would ask that the board consider not issuing any order here. At an absolute minimum, be assured that Mr. Cresta is going forward with the installation of this video surveillance system. And as he indicated, Mr. O'Leary, perfectly happy to make that available in the future to the dog officers for purposes of identifying any excessive barking. I take your point, Mr. Chairman, that doesn't necessarily stop it, but it certainly eliminates the problem, and a very significant problem, I think, that confronts this board at this time, which is identifying which dogs are responsible for the excessive barking. So I think the board owes at least Mr. Cresta the benefit of what I consider to be a significant doubt before this hearing. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
I have one question.
I have one
Mr.
question, too.
Cresta had implied that he was installing this system. Can you give us a date of when?
Yeah, I think he
Is
did
it
more than
installed?
imply, sir. He incled in the
Yeah, there isn't a
material I
date.
gave you.
This is
that's
this is a
work order or?
Mr. Cresta.
Yeah, this is a work letter, but it's not, this is
Not signed.
not signed and not
Installed
dated as to
contract.
when it's gonna be.
Is it installed now?
You're right, it's not signed, but it's a contract. Michael, do you know what
Has it been yet? This was October, I don't know.
Mr. Vanellope, it's a good question. All the software has been installed. The remote routers have been installed. It's now a matter of the weather has kind of put your things up between the cold and the snow. The cameras have to be mounted. And I'll be glad to, my attorney, let the board know when it is finally installed. And obviously, the funny feeling that it's going to be done a lot quicker than anyone realized.
And if I
Yes,
may-
Mr.
And I assume, Mr. Cresta, because I know you are trying to cooperate, that these would be on 24/7, these cameras?
That's the whole point of it, sir.
And at any point, if the board or the dog officer or the police wanted to view the film because we received a specific complaint at a specific time, you'd have no problem with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And we'll go one step further. One of the cameras will actually reach the street and the sidewalk. It's a high-resolution camera that will be out there as well.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you take the, I guess it's not video anymore, it's more high-tech now. But how long, your cameras are on 24/7, but what's the playback time?
Mr. Yule, I'm not an IT person. I pay these guys to work for me. We have several video monitors within my home. And like I said, and believe me, I am very sincere about having you guys come down. I can show you where that'll be all set up and
No,
what have you.
I
I
understand
think
that, but...
Mr. Yule's question was, what will be the retention?
I can't answer that right now. I believe that the cameras are 24 hours a day, and it does have a 24-hour loop.
A 24-hour loop?
Yes.
But if the
I'm sure it can be retained
hours
on
and-
disk.
Yeah, okay, I'd like to know that, because you can get the complaint that your dog officer finishes at 3, the complaint's at 4, next day he comes in, he can't get to it
What's
until,
a weekend?
you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, the surveillance there, how much it retains is crucial.
It's totally understood, Mr. Yule, and I'm not prepared to give you that answer, but I will have that answer first thing in the morning and have that over to the board. Right, sir.
I'd like to ask some of the residents, Mr. Chairman, any suggestions as to what you might suggest to the board? Would you have any suggestions to the board as to what you would see as an acceptable resolution at this point in time?
Perfectly acceptable would be the situation as it is right now. We've heard no barking for the last 4 weeks. I can't speak for everyone, but I would find it acceptable. If the barking were, I guess, subjective, but what I would consider normal, a dog barks occasionally, a deer runs by and it barks. Someone comes into the yard, it barks. Someone comes to the front door, it barks. But when it goes on, and we've had many occasions, and this past summer, there were occasions, when, I mean, I can't give you actual time, I don't need to sit there with a stopwatch. But my God, for several hours it went on. 5 minutes barking, several minutes quiet. 5 minutes barking, 10 minutes quiet. And back and forth. I mean, there can't be that many people coming into the yard, deer, all that sort of thing that will create that situation. But I mean, a reasonable amount of barking is going to happen occasionally. It has not been occasional in the past.
Mr. Diamond?
I think, since it's been brought to the attention, as I said, there's been a significant improvement. And at least for the last 9 weeks, I haven't heard but one Saturday morning, I think. You know, and like I said, I'm a dog lover. I don't want to put a collar on a dog that's going to shock him. But when you tell me that's to prevent the barking, my belief is, okay, well, he doesn't get shocked if he doesn't bark. So it's like a regular collar. It's not inhumane. But when they tell you it's inhumane, it's because he's getting shocked. You know, there's a conflict here from what I resolve. But whatever they've done for the last month or so, I think it's longer. It's been improving, but certainly for the last month has been, whatever you did to take care of that problem is fine. I think it's quite satisfactory. Some barking is quite tolerable. Incessant barking is.
I'd like to add to this. I just feel that if we could hear those dogs barking, Mr. Prescott could hear those dogs barking. So all I suggest is bring your dogs in when they're barking. If that had been done in the beginning, we wouldn't have this poor dog in this collar, and we wouldn't be sitting here with this situation. And I'm sorry that I didn't make as much impression on Mr. Preston when I went to his house as he made on me.
I find that hard to believe.
I do too.
I know you as well as I do.
Oh, okay, let's not, through the chair, please.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Creston.
I think there's just a couple things that we're losing sight of here. Our neighbors are saying that during the summer, they had quite a lot more barking happening during the summer months. I would consider Ridgeway Estates, Country Club Road, up that area. People have a lot of work done to their homes, painters, masons, landscapers. We heard last couple weeks ago that there's more than one dog in the neighborhood. There's several, 12, 13, whatever the case. I don't think any of us have actually looked up how many dogs there really are, okay? When that happens, dogs have a tendency to bark at strangers. Doesn't matter who they are. So we still have not established which dog it is, and we'll leave it at that. We all thought that the whole idea here is we're trying to get to the bottom of this, which dogs it actually is, and how we can resolve this. And I'm all for dogs not barking, but that's an unrealistic hope. Dogs do bark, and if a dog does not bark at all, then all we're doing is harming the animal. Okay?
I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And I think the neighbors have just basically said, if we can manage to keep the level of barking down to what it is for the past 30 days, and we don't know what you've done, and we don't know what Mrs. Shaughnessy has done, right? But obviously something has happened to improve the situation.
Yes, and I agree with that, Mr. Chair, except unfortunately, over the last 30 days, we're all assuming that Mrs. Shaughnessy and I have